initiativene og nedover til produktområdet, sånn at forretningsperspektivet da ivaretas.
Ja, tusen takk. Da neste og siste innlegg fra Marit og Audun her fra NRK. Dere ansvarlig for hvert deres område, NRK.no og radio, stemmer det?
Ja. Det stemmer. Vi skal prøve å få det ut av døra i tide til 11 også. Dette de to produkter vi jobber med, skal vi se, kanskje. Vi jobber da med henholdsvis NRK.no og NRK Radio. Som selvfølgelig apper dere har, så vi trenger jo ikke å bruke så tid på å fortelle om det, men vi har produktutviklingssjefer for de produktene. Og forretningsmodellen til NRK, den jo liksom like kjerkete sikkert som veldig mange av de andre som jobber i offentlig sektor, men vi har en tredelt bunnlinje. Det største av alt oppdraget som vi har fått fra Kulturdepartementet, selvfølgelig samfunnsoppdraget vårt, og så vi helt avhengig av å ha tillit hos folk. De må ha tillit til journalistikken vår, de må ha tillit til det innholdet vi lager, og selvfølgelig tillit og tro på oss til å gidde å betale NRK-skatten eller det som var lisensen før. Og så det med sånn at innhold som ikke blir brukt har ingen verdi. Og bruk et viktig bunnlinje for oss. Og for å klare å styre etter disse tre hele veien ned, så det alltid oppdraget i topp. Og så jobber vi med noe vi kaller en langtidsstrategi, som har en ganske lang levetid i NRK, 5 år-ish. Og så drar vi den ned til det vi kaller publikumsstrategien, som vi reviderer ganske hyppig, hva vi skal gjøre for publikum. Og så i produktutviklingssfæren så har vi da 4 måneders lange det vi kaller fokusområder, og som gjør at vi kan, som noen var inne på her tidligere, kan si at nei, nå har vi jobbet med dette i 4 måneder, det ikke som vi trodde, vi kan reprioritere, så en veldig god mekanisme for å reprioritere på produktutvikling, og så bryter vi det ned i aktiviteter og oppgaver.
Ja, og nå sitter vi jo i store studier, som en del av historie som organisasjon. Vi jo en organisasjon som har lenge vært et slags velsmurt bestillingsmaskineri for å styre innholdsproduksjoner, som har vært veldig viktig for NRK, men det har jo aldri vært utgangspunktet vårt for produktutvikling. Og det vi gjør nå å vi beveget oss mer og mer bort fra en bestillingslogikk til en strategisk styring av både innhold, publisering og produktutvikling. Og Marit og jeg, vi som vi kanskje sa innledningsvis her, produktutviklingssjefer. Forkortes til PUS. Det var det første vi måtte gjøre etter at vi opprettet den stillingen 5 år siden. Og vi
Okay, so that's just your... And the recording will be up on the cloud, and I will send the details afterwards. So we have 5 minutes if anybody, here's the view outside my apartment window in Norway. And in the apartment.
I guess it's not cloudy over there.
It's cloudy. We don't have a sunshine day. Lot of cloudy days now.
Quite.
It's the fall. I'm trying to figure out how to change. Let's see, pin edit, rename. I finally found it. Okay. Tom at gilb.com, Norway. Oh, wonderful. There we go. I'm borrowing my son's company's Zoom, so we can, he's paying for it, so we get to go longer than 43 minutes. For information, I have sent the slides to Gerald and Manuel. And I have also sent a previous recording of the whole thing I did for British Computer Society. So we already have a video of most of this. So Uchenna, what are you interested in, your main topic?
I haven't gotten the topic yet. I'm saying in look for a topic. So
Okay. Or maybe you'll take requirements as a topic.
requirements.
Well, it's a very interesting topic. I'm going to plug in my earphones with my microphone, and I'd like you to tell me if you get better sound. Okay, so now I should be on the microphone. Is this any better sound than we had when I was just using the speaker of my Mac?
I can't.
Yes, it's quite good. Yeah, sounds a little bit louder.
Okay. The important thing is that it's clearer, but so
Hello, Tom.
hello.
Hello, how are you doing?
I'm good today, yeah. Okay.
So the audio is very good. I mean, I can hear you very well, so it should work fine. Maybe let's
Okay.
wait 5 minutes to gather more people. Okay.
So shall we wait a little bit?
Yeah, we should wait because more people are expected. So
Okay.
for example, Hamna and others saying that they are stuck with Zoom. There
Right.
is some problem, but I think it will be resolved in a few minutes.
Okay. What kind of problems would we get with Zoom?
No, I think it's on their side. Probably they have a problem with updating or the software getting stuck for some reason. It's not a
Okay.
problem on your side.
Okay.
I think it should be resolved. Let me see.
I think it's nice if you show your picture so I can see you, but if you don't
Yes,
want
yes.
to.
No, of course I want. I
Everybody.
will set it up.
Yeah, no,
soon.
I wasn't especially talking to you, Manuel, but all the other people, I hope when the lecture is going, they can turn off their picture, probably better, but
It's a good idea to switch on the camera now, and maybe
Yeah.
in case of questions, we can switch on cameras. No, I'm here.
okay, there we go.
And
Okay,
yeah, let's do like this. I know that you you accept questions during the lecture, right?
yes, of course, we have yes, of course.
So in that case, probably people can raise their hand or just intervene, maybe with the audio, and switch
Yeah.
on the camera for that minute, and then maybe
Yeah.
switch off the camera again.
That'll work,
No.
that'll work. Otherwise, put the questions in the questions and answers.
Yes.
Let's
Also
see, I
so.
only have chat here. I can't see question and answer myself, but
For me, when I
Okay.
present on Zoom, for example, it's difficult to follow also the chat and to follow the hand. No, there is this little hand that is
Yeah.
waving on the, but this is difficult to follow. So I will do this for you. So in case I see something, I will interrupt.
Okay, you can be my chief there. Let's see.
Okay, let's see.
Ideally, I should give you co-host. Make co-host. Okay, you are now co-host, so you have extra privileges.
Thank you.
And Gerald, I will also make Gerald co-host. Yes, okay, so we have two co-hosts in case something goes wrong.
Good. So you're planning any break? What is your schedule for the
Yes,
day?
I'm planning a break. So at 10 minutes to the hour, when I theoretically have gone 50 minutes, then I plan a 10-minute break.
Okay, so I
during
will
the
not
break-
interrupt you. You do by yourself, or should I tell you? Should
Well,
I tell you, or
you can tell me if I forget it, but I have set my timers.
okay, good, good.
I've set timers. Let's see. So it would be, first one is, let's see what my timers say. Yeah, I had one wrong one there, but okay.
Tom, do you want to start with quick round of people maybe introducing themselves very briefly, maybe by name and by what do they expect from this lecture, or just to hear their voice?
I can do that. What do you recommend?
I think it would be a good idea. We have maybe 15 people,
Then-
so in
okay,
10
then-
minutes you can go through
right.
that.
Sure. Well, then we can start now with the people who are
Yes.
here.
Yes, yes. I think it's time to start now. Yes.
Okay. So Andrea,
Andrei, I think.
Andrea
Yeah,
Kulivelli.
hello. Yeah, hello. So my name is Andrei. I'm a first year master student in Innopolis. Yeah, I have some experience with web applications and so. And from the lecture, I don't know. I expect to know something new, maybe, and to listen professional.
Right.
Yeah, and
I
to
hope
have
you
fun.
will. I hope you will learn 100 new things, not just something, not just maybe. You can count. Make a little tabulation every time you learn something new, and you can tell me at the end how many new things you learned.
Okay.
You know that last year Tom started cooperation with some of our colleagues, for example, with Gerald and also with others, and some of the collaboration are still ongoing. So maybe I hope that can be the same this year.
Yep. Well, I'm always happy to help people. There's my email, as you see, so you can ask me any question by email afterwards, maybe something to help with your studies or thesis or something like that. So I just like to help. So feel free. I'm retired, so I've got the privilege of doing anything I want with my time. So, okay, so next man is the other Andrea, if he can.
Hello, I'm the second Andrei.
Yeah.
I'm also having experience in web development. So now I'm working in two companies in front-end development area. So I don't know what to expect from this lecture. So maybe I can say what I think after the lecture.
Yeah, this is
when I will get the knowledge.
Okay. Okay. Well, you will everybody should expect a new way of thinking about all problems, all projects. Okay. So, in other words, a new way of thinking about requirements for anything. That's what everybody should expect. Okay. You should also expect that you will be overwhelmed with too many ideas. So you won't understand everything in this lecture, but you will get a book. And if you're interested, you can read at your own pace and study these things. So expect to, I hope you expect to want to learn more, quite simply. Okay, that you can see that this could be valuable for whatever you do. Okay, thank you, Andre. Ruslan is the next man on my list here.
Yeah, hello. I'm also the first year student, and I have some experience in quality assurance area. Now I work as a QA automation engineer. Mostly I expect, like a lot of experience which you can share with us, and some practical problems, and how did you solve it, and why you solve it in some particular way?
Oh, okay. Now, yeah, I do have a lot of examples and case studies here, so some of that, but I'm not going to primarily teach the case studies. I use them only as examples. So I'm going to teach the process of setting requirements. Okay. So, but I have some books which are referred to in the back of the slides and during the slides, and some of these books, for example, one called Value Planning. It is 700 pages, and it has lots and lots of case studies of how I solve problems, maybe 100 case studies. So I have plenty of literature on practical case studies. And if you have it now, by the way, if I say something like that and you say, what did he say? Value planning, write me an email. Say, Tom, you said you have a place where you have lots of case studies. Send it to me. I'll be happy to send it to you. Okay. So, but I need your email. So you just send an email to me and say, I'm interested in case studies. So I'll send you the value planning book and you can get all the case studies you want there. I can also give you case studies on particular businesses or areas. I've been collecting case studies for almost 50 years. So I have plenty of them. So, Uchenna.
Hello. Yeah. Also a first year student, software engineering. I've gotten some experience as web developer and also build a personal project with friends on payment gateway borderless. Okay. So actually I'm just expecting to get information and try to link how I can solve some things on a personal project.
Okay, that's fair enough. Okay, so Gerald, I know you, but maybe the other people don't know. So is it true that I'm generous with my time and help people? Gerald may still be traveling. Okay, your
Hello.
microphone. Hi, Gerald.
Hello. Hi. So maybe my internet
Gerald.
break. Hello. So I'm still on the Innopolis bus coming.
Okay.
So it might be hard to hear. So I'm Gerald. I'm currently a second year PhD student at Innopolis. And I'm currently working with Tom and Mazara on intelligent prioritization of making decisions. Yeah, that's basically about me. And hope on 30th we'll have a small talk on a topic that I gave at Gilb Fest. Looking forward.
Okay, sound gone, bus. Alex Pirogov, can you turn on your microphone? Where'd he go? Yeah, there he goes. Hi, Alex.
I'm currently working as a freelancer, and from this lecture, I expect a lot of new ideas on requirements engineering.
Good expectation. To tell me afterwards if you get a lot of good new ideas. New ideas is one thing. Good new ideas is even better. Uchenna. No, you were there. Okay, so Fairushin.
It's me. Good afternoon. Personally, I'll turn on my video. Another people here. My name is Mithat Fairushin. I'm undergraduate student of Tashkent University of Information Technologies. So for 2 years, I know about Innopolis and prepared to study here. So I'm here. Yes, I had an experience in my hometown working with a national teacher competition system, ERP system for Ministry of Public Education's media, and I worked as developer, particularly in some projects. In some projects, had an experience to gather requirements, but I see a very big difference how it works. It worked there in my work and how it should be. So I want to gain some insights on some good approach. Yes, how to make the requirements gathering in a good manner to success whole project, because the requirements are essential, as you see.
Okay, hope we can help.
I'm glad to hear you now. Thank you.
Thank you. Alexander Suzev?
Yeah, right. Hello.
Hello.
My name is Alexander. I have experience in business, in team lead and development. So new thinking way sounds interesting. I expected to know.
Good. Okay. And let's see who I think Vladimir Semenov.
Yes, hello. So I'm playing a role of teaching assistant on this course, and I will be watching if you need anything with the translation today. As of for the questions, I have experience most of all with architecture, so my expectation is just to absorb the wisdom of working with requirements, because it's a huge part of my work. Yeah.
Okay,
That's
good.
it.
Vladimir, for your information, I have a book I will send you if you email request on architecture. It's called SEA, System Enterprise Architecture. And so you can have a free copy of it. Okay?
Okay, great. Thank you very much.
So who didn't have a chance to say something? I can't see from the screen. Maybe, is that Paolo? Paolo.
Hello. Paolo is Paolo is our professor actually. So
Yeah. Well, he's allowed to talk even. Hello, Paolo.
Yeah, yes.
Or what are you expecting?
You mean myself?
Yeah, you personally.
Yeah, I'm a colleague of Manuel. So when I saw his message, I was intrigued and I wanted to listen to you. Requirements are, I teach Agile. So requirements, user stories, use cases are all the time an interesting puzzle for students. And I like to see novel approaches or maybe suggestions on how to manage requirements in software development in general, and possibly in agile development. If I was interested in this talk for this reason, that we develop a lot of requirements with the students, but requirements are very difficult to manage for them.
Okay, where are you?
I'm in Italy, in Bologna.
That's Bologna. Okay, that's what I thought. If you email me and ask for Agile, I will send you some Agile books. So I have many books on Agile.
Okay.
Just say, send me Agile stuff, Tom. Okay, but I can tell you that my requirements are very well connected with Agile. Okay, there's a clear and definite connection, but I may have to spell it out. Okay. Welcome from Italy and other people. I can't see any names we haven't talked with.
I think at the moment there is well, Hamna, probably you know her. You didn't. I don't know if she wants to participate or not.
Hi, Manvar. Hi, Tom. Hi,
Hi.
everyone. So I'm very pleased to see you again. Thank you very much. And I'm sorry, I cannot open the video right now, but I'm seeing you all. And what I'm looking forward to, learning some new, getting some new perspectives about requirements and I want to understand what you mean by value requirements. So I
Oh.
do research in requirements engineering, very much looking forward to it.
Oh, wow. Okay. So good.
Thank you.
Okay, so I think I can start the talk. I better get
Yeah,
going.
I think so. I think that no one is missing. If anyone is missing, maybe please appear, but I think we
Okay. Yeah,
we
people can just
we
come
can
in
start.
when they want. Right. Okay.
Yes.
So first slide. Let's get it into play and get this. If I could get rid of this, but okay. And there we go. Okay. So you will notice you can get a hold of the slides from these URLs. And I've sent a copy of the slides to Manuel, so he has them also. Can put them on a link somewhere.
Everything is in our Moodle page, so the students have already access to the material.
Good. And we already have a video. I held this talk once earlier. So we already have a video, and we're making a video now for this one. So we'll get that later. Here are my contacts, email, website, and Twitter. On Twitter and LinkedIn, I announce new papers, new books, new slides, things like that, if you want to follow what I'm developing. Now, the entire course or long lecture is based on this book, Value Requirements, and you can have a free download of the book through the links here. If you have any trouble, send me an email or something, but I've tested the links. So the slides are more or less taken from the book in the sequence of the book. And here is the table of contents of things that I would like to get through during this day. So quite a big syllabus here. So part one is defining the idea of a value requirement. Okay, so now a value requirement is a stakeholder value requirement. So in other words, it is a value that stakeholders have, and if we could deliver it to them, they would be happy. It would be valuable for them. So in other words, the source is stakeholders, and the idea is that it is of value to them. Now, we've discovered something about value requirements, and that is that they are all quantifiably variable. That is, they're not function requirements, what we do, they're binary. You either do the function, like collect a tax, or you do not collect the tax, okay? But value requirements need to be and can be quantified. So I'll tell you very much more about that during the lecture. But that's one characteristic of what we call value requirements. They are quantifiable, okay? And the other thing is that there are many stakeholders. In some projects, maybe 50 to 200 stakeholders. I'll go into more depth on stakeholders in a little while. And they all have one or more values. Okay. In fact, if they didn't have any values, they would not be one of our stakeholders. So they hold a stake. That means they have a value they want delivered. That is the definition of stakeholder. These values are, in a sense, attached to the functions. They're attached to what the system does. And typically, these values are, very many of them, are qualities like usability, security, adaptability, portability, all the ilities. So but not all values are qualities. We can get back to that later. Okay. Here's a little map of some stakeholders, little person symbol. And here with the symbol of a little yellow arrow are some value ideas. So this is actually some planning for COVID we did just before COVID hit, and in a classroom situation. So so here we have a set of value requirements, and that's very typical, that we don't have one value, and we don't have 500 either. That's too many. I often talk about the top 10 critical values. In other words, this is a way of prioritizing the most important things to do. When you've done them, you can prioritize some additional ones. There is no end to the needs that stakeholders have, but we need to focus on the most important ones first, the most important value requirements. I also believe that you will observe, as I have, that the most important thing about any project or any piece of work is that we are trying to achieve some set of values, okay? And we need to be very clear about what these values are so that we can manage our efforts and make sure we're going in the right direction of delivering these values to the stakeholders. Now, you might wonder what all these little lines are. They're actually relationships, like from this stakeholder, we have two values. One is to collect information, and the other might be a bit tricky to find it, but we'll say it goes to something like resource capacity. We can see that some stakeholders have, for the moment, no identified values. We can say, well, what are they doing here, or have we forgotten their value? Some stakeholders only have one value they have articulated, but maybe they have more and we haven't just found them yet. And some stakeholders have multiple values at the same time. So that's normal. We're using a little app called ValPlan, which digitally knows about these interconnections and can map them for us. So we are going to focus on value requirements, but there are some other types of requirements, just to give you an overview. And for example, as I mentioned, we have function requirements, and functions are just simply what the system must do, okay? And it's binary, and we have an oval symbol for it. We have some resource requirements. These are budgets and deadlines and things like that. They could also be technical debt in the future, the maintenance cost of the system. But they're also limited resources, unlimited resources. We don't have to, if you have any, we don't have to worry about them. But when you have a limited budget, a limited deadline, limited people, then we have to budget them, and they become a requirement. You're required to finish on a certain date. You're required to not use more than the financial budget, etc. So the resource requirements are a class of requirement. But we're most interested in the value requirements. I have a symbol, an icon of an arrow coming out of the function, and any one function can have many different value requirements, which allow us to describe, for example, how secure is this function? How user-friendly are we when dealing with this function? This kind of thing. Okay, so that's meant as an overview of requirement types. Now, going a little bit deeper, here's a book. You can get free digital copy. I hope maybe there is a paper copy in your library, but if not, there's the free digital copy, Competitive Engineering. And this has a glossary of terms. This diagram is from the glossary, and it shows all the different kinds of requirements that we have defined in the book So here's the function requirement that I just talked about. It's what we do. Here is the performance requirement is the term used by systems engineers. So I stick to that, but that is the same as what I'm calling value requirements here. Okay. So performance requirement, value requirement, quality requirement, let's just say roughly the same thing. Here are 3 different types of performance requirement. And all these little numbers here, they mean that this term is formally defined in the book or in the formal glossary. So here's the full 700 term glossary. If you like to have well-defined terms for any purpose, I can offer you them. Okay, somebody has their microphone on who just coughed. Anyway, not a problem. Okay, so let's take a look at something very popular in IT called user stories. Somebody mentioned them. Some people, this is the only kind of requirement they really know about. They consider those are their requirements. I consider user stories to be too little information to be a good requirement, okay? But it's a starting point. And what we need to do when we have a user story is to define in more detail exactly what it's saying. So for example, as an expert user, I want shortcuts to save me time. Now, let me parse this. The requirement is to save time. So we need to specify how much time, like 6 minutes, we want to spend, and by what time we want to be able to save that time. For example, this is the deadline. At the end of next year, we want to do things in 6 minutes. And it says here, expert user. Well, what is that expert user doing? It doesn't say, but maybe they're doing some expert complex tasks. If we define that, we've defined a little bit more about the expert user. Now, it says here, I want shortcuts. This is actually not a requirement. This is actually a design. Okay, the shortcuts are our design for saving me time. So really, we need to take this shortcuts and put it in another place called our designs so as to achieve time. It doesn't really belong here. And by the way, it is illogical to not be clear about who, the expert user in more detail, is going to save how much time. Until you know these 2 things, you cannot decide on the architecture or the design. You cannot decide that shortcuts is going to be the way to do it. There could be some other design. So it's actually a very bad practice to allow people setting requirements to tell you what the design is. I believe design is for designers or architects, and they need good, clear information on who and how well we need to do things. So we'll be looking at this in more detail, but what I'm trying to do is take this traditional well-known thing called a user story and put it in place as sort of a high level. By the way, this arrow means the source is, and then there's user story number 030719. So that's exactly where we got the user story. But for me, the user story is then a high level rough vision that needs a lot of hard work to be more precise so that we get so we don't get misinterpretations of this, and so we don't get the design too early or prematurely. Okay, so part 2, the key idea that we need to learn about is called a scale of measure. So if I say I have a very fast car, you say, well, that's nice, Tom, but how fast? I say, well, in kilometers per hour, it can do 150. Aha. So the scale of measure is kilometers per hour. and its speed is then 150 of those. So it's the same idea as a kilometer per hour. What we do in my planning language, which is defined in that competitive engineering book you get a free copy of, we define the scale of measure, and then we have different points on the scale. So symbolically, this big red arrow is a scale of measure. And then on the scale, we have different numbers, okay? So for example, the B stands for benchmark, and the benchmark could be my old car only went 100 kilometers per hour, okay? And C could be a constraint. In the worst case, my new car must do at least 120 kilometers an hour, okay? But T is for target. It says, I will really only be fully happy if I get a car that goes at least 150 kilometers an hour. Okay, so this is my dream. I want to go 150. This is the minimum I will bother to get a new car for. It must go at least 120. And for your information or for systems analysis, the benchmark is that my old car went 100. So these are examples of 3 different classes of points on the scale. Okay. By the way, those who are counting ideas, one idea is clearly a scale of measure, which we're going to spend a lot of time on. And then another idea is that there are benchmarks or systems analysis on the scale of a measure. Another idea is that there are constraints, minimum, worst case things on the scale of measure. And the third idea is that there are targets, which are levels of performance that we are aiming towards, which would define success. So those are 4 different ideas on the one slide here. Here it is in language. If we, for example, say we want security. Now this thing here at the top is called a tag. It is simply a name, so we can reference all this detail by use of that term security. It says that security is defined as, and then first we have a scale of measure. So we announce here scale is a parameter. By scale, status, tolerable, and wish are parameters in language, okay? And so let's try to define security with a scale of measure. This is just a simple example, but it sounds intelligible. The percentage probability of detecting a hacker within 5 seconds, okay? So how good is our previous system? What is the status of the system we're using right now? And the answer is 10%. So 10% probability we can detect the hacker within 5 seconds, 90% probability we will not. Doesn't sound very good. Okay, so this is our benchmark. What is the minimum we require when we build our new system to even go live or accept it or pay for it at all? And somebody has decided, it doesn't say who, and it should, but hopefully a stakeholder who's very interested in security, we need to get to 80%, so 8 times better. Okay, so that's a very clear idea. It's a much clearer idea than we need good security, right? It's a measurable idea. And in terms of agile, we can, in agile increments, move to 10 to 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80. Okay, so here is where we integrate agile with these ideas that once we have numbers, we can iteratively increment our way towards our requirements. By the way, this is a requirement. We have to be at least as good as 80%. This is not a requirement, but it's in the requirement specification, but it's background information. We'll get back to that later. It's just it's systems analysis integrated into the requirement specification. So there's an idea that we can integrate systems analysis information into a requirement, and that is useful. Many people do systems analysis, and then they say, okay, now let's specify the requirements, but they don't bring this information into the requirement, and it often gets forgotten or difficult to access. But it is useful in the long term, so we bring it into the requirement. Okay, but it is not a requirement. It's in the specification of a requirement. And the third statement here, wish, this is the stakeholder value wish, and it's to get to 98% by the end of next year. Now, wish means the stakeholder would value this. It does not mean that we have to deliver it. Let's just say, for the sake of argument, that if we were to deliver 98, it would cost 100 times more than 80. And even to get to 97 will cost the same as 80. But the moment we go to 98, it costs 100 times more. We can go back to that stakeholder and say, do you realize that if we go to 80, it will cost you 100 times more? Do you have the money? Do you have the budget? No, I don't. Okay, then you cannot have 98, but we can give you 97 for the same budget as 80. Is that okay? So in other words, the wish is not required, it is desired. That's another concept, the difference between required and desired. That's another new idea. We use the term goal for something we are going to deliver in the project because it is economic and practical and things like that. And we'll be lecturing on that idea of the goal later. But wish is sort of preliminary dreaming by a stakeholder. And the wish says, we did record your wish, but we cannot promise to do it because we don't know if it is technically practical or economically practical. Okay, so scales of measure. Okay, so the core thing that I want you to learn is the idea of definition of a scale of measure. I told you already that absolutely all value requirements are always quantified. That means there is always a scale of measure to define it. By the way, sometimes a value is what we call complex, and it has many scales of measure. We'll get back to that later. But we definitely express all values with scales of measure. We can use the scale of measure to define what is successful and what is done and what is completed in a project. Okay, we can use it to define what is failure, like we won't pay the sub-supplier, failure. Successful payment, we can use these things to write contracts. That's another couple of ideas, that these numbers can be used to define what we pay people and how we reward them and how we view their work. Okay, now if we define a scale of measure, we get increased clarity. We don't just say better security, we define security as a scale of measure. Now, a better definition of the goals of a team working together give better teamwork. That is, everybody on the team has the same basis. They have a shared idea. They cannot each misunderstand it in different directions, okay? I already mentioned this, that the specification can be legal, i.e. it can be put in bids, bid on this project, in contracts, okay, here's what we're doing. The scale is also very useful for projects which are geographically spread out. You're not dependent on a local culture of people who eat lunch together every day. They can be all over any place in the world on the internet working on the team, but they still are more likely to understand exactly what the team is doing. Okay. Now here's another thing. The scale is what I call a quantification idea. It says, how are we going to quantify? It is not a measurement idea. We have a parameter called a meter. That is where we specify how we're going to measure in practice. So for example, in the car example, 150 kilometers per hour is a quantification. But say, well, how do you know it goes 150? I say, I look at my speedometer. Well, the speedometer is the meter. Okay. Now you could have given a different answer. The police stopped me for going too fast at 150, and they used a radar. That's a different meter for the same scale of measure. Okay, so here's another idea. Scale and meter are two different concepts, and there can be many different meters for one single scale, as there can be many different ways of measuring the speed of a car. Okay, and the next idea is that we reuse the scale for very many different things, like the benchmarks, the constraints, and the targets that I talked about earlier. But we also reuse them for short-term planning and long-term planning, to take another idea. So we take the trouble to define a scale very well. It can be long, usually a long sentence. We'll look at more detail in a moment. And we reuse it, and we can even reuse it in different projects, things like that. But we do have to tailor it and make sure it works for this project area that we're working in. By the way, if you go and look up causes of project failure on the internet and look at the top ones, you'll find that the major causes are all to do with bad requirements or unclear requirements. Okay, so by taking the time and effort to do really good, clear requirements like I'm talking about here, you should be reducing the chance that your projects will fail. That's why you want to take the time and effort. So here are the ideas of the scale of measure. First, the scale of measure needs to have a useful meaning. That is, the stakeholders should feel that they understand it, that it's relevant for them. Okay, and it should not be so short. For example, good security, that there are lots of undefined terms and people need to guess what it is. It should be unambiguously clear, and everybody reading it should get exactly the same intended definition. Okay, that's the objective of the whole of my planning language is to make things unambiguously clear to the people reading the requirements and designs and things like that. Okay, that's good enough for the moment. Now, when I go in and ask people for their requirements, and often getting things like user stories, what we often get is informal statements like, we need better performance, and Tesla prefers to focus on safety first, and Elon Musk said this. Okay, so now that's nice, but what is performance? There are many types of it. Before performance prefers to focus on, here's a hint that they have a priority of safety, and they achieve that very well in their cars, it turns out. But there are all the other qualities, like the speed and the maintainability of the car, are also performance. So this is really not a very clear statement, but it is the statement made by the boss of the company, so we have to give it some respect. So statements like that I call ambition level. And here's the definition. of an ambition level. By the way, sometimes the user story is almost the same thing as an ambition level. So if you have user stories, I would use them instead of the ambition level. But the point is, we capture a rough, ambiguous, not so clear statement. We even give the source, who said it, when did they say it. It has a certain power. I mean, Elon may be unclear, but he has power, and we have to respect it. But it's not good enough to hand this out to people who are going to do serious work. We have to clarify it. And by the way, Elon does sincerely believe in clarifying requirements numerically, like I'm talking about. Okay, he's very serious at it, even though that sometimes he makes statements like this. He does drill down to the detail. I have a booklet called Musk's Methods, which I will send on request to anybody who emails me, which will document his more detailed practices. Okay. Now, so we have the ambition level. Then in simple terms, when the ambition level is not as clear and it does not include a scale, we need to build one. So we write the parameter scale, and we try to write something down like percentage average passenger safety rating by the Euro NCAP, National Car Association, something, whatever that is. Okay, that's and now this may be a bad scale. It may be an irrelevant scale, or Elon may take one look at it and say, yep, that's the scale I'm going to use. Let's make that official. When I'm talking safety, I expect we will be measured by this scale. That is, in fact, what he really does. Okay. So long story short, what I'm trying to teach at a simple level is the user stories or the ambition levels need to be stated. They need to be included in the requirement specification, but we need to begin to interpret the meaning of them. And step one is to define a scale of measure, and finally agree with the powers that be that scale of measure is acceptable for them, and we will work together on it until further notice. Okay. So here is a list of and each one of these is a separate idea. So count 1, 2, 3, etc. But there's a set of questions that we have to ask to move from an ambition or a user story to a scale. And I've written them down as a checklist. Here I'll just skip to one as an example. Does this cover all the market areas? See, now it says here Euro, and I can promise you that in outside the European area, there, for example, take the United States area, they have their own measures of car safety. So this scale of measure, okay, this scale of measure fails that test, and maybe we need to do something like include the United States, or say whatever national body measures safety should be used, or something like that. But that's an example of using this checklist to detect that this scale is probably not good enough if we are marketing our car outside Europe. Okay. Here's another one. Would the power that be, symbolically Elon Musk, himself think this is a good scale of measure? Okay, here's the power, and here's this, but we've got to go back to a stakeholder called Elon and say, Elon, do you approve? Do you like this? Because if you don't, we've got a problem, and we've got to solve the problem, and we've got to find a scale of measure that's acceptable to you. You own the bloody company, or at least you're the CEO and you own a lot of it. Now, my alarm rang for a 10-minute break, and my coffee arrived. My dear wife provided me with a cup of coffee. So we will stop here for 10 minutes. We'll stop lecturing. I will be online, and I will informally take questions and talk with people, but I will continue the lecture on the hour.
Thank you, Tom. Thank you.
And I can see all your faces and pictures now. So
we'll start at 2 p.m. local time, Moscow time. Okay.
Yeah. Right.
I will also go to pick up coffee. No one is bringing to me. I need to.
Oh. Oh, it's honey and ginger in tea or something like that. What's on my cup? Nice cup. Nice Chinese cup.
Very beautiful. Tom, please say hi to your wife also from us.
Okay. Hi to my wife from the audience.
Thank you.
Yeah, she takes good care of me. We are both over 80 years old, and we knew each other since I was 17 and she was 18. And we met in London at a coffee bar.
Wow. Beautiful.
That's yeah, it's a beautiful story. We have four boys and five grandchildren. Sorry. Yeah.
That's great.
And we're hoping maybe we get some great grandchildren, little small babies to play with, because all the grandchildren are about around 20 years old these days. They're not as much fun as the little kiddies.
Absolutely, yes.
So, Arafat didn't hear yet, yeah. So, Arafat, would you like to introduce yourself as the others have done and say what you're interested in?
Yeah. I'm trying to open my camera.
Yeah. Good. We got your voice.
I'm Arafat by name. I'm a front-end developer. I look forward, to learning more about requirement engineering and how the concept can be used to manage a software product successfully.
Okay. I hope you're going to get it. If
Yeah,
all else fails, take a breath, wait a week, and start reading the book, Value Requirements.
Okay, sir. Thank you, sir.
It's all in there. You don't have to worry about absorbing everything, learning or understanding everything. I think if you just relax and if you can at some point say to yourself, I think these things are worth studying. I will start using the book. Then you don't have to remember anything except this is probably worth learning. That's all. But just relax.
Sir, are you ready to start taking questions?
Yes, take a question now. Sure.
Okay, I have a question. Can we say a requirement engineer is the same as a product manager or a technical product manager?
Okay. Well, no, is the simple answer. Okay. But let's define each one. Okay. Now, a product owner, I think in Scrum terms, product owner, right? They may be feeding the team both requirements and designs. They're really feeding the team stuff to do. And actually, primarily, they should be feeding the team designs. Because that's what you do. You do the design. Now, the design is derived from the requirement. Okay. So the product owner doesn't even have to know the requirement. The requirement may be given to the system architect, the designer, and the architect comes up with the design. And the product owner can feed that design to the team and say, now we need to build this, now we need to build that. Okay. So, but now I believe that product owner is very badly designed and practiced. Okay. I have a paper about what is wrong with product owners that I wrote. And if you write me an email and say, send me that thing about product owner, I will send you the paper on product owner. Okay? But so the first thing I did, and we need to do, is to separate very clearly into requirements on the one hand and the design to meet the requirements on the other hand. And the teams that in Scrum, they are building, they are writing code. Okay, so they giving them a requirement, you should have better security, or you should even have 10% more security. That's no good for the team. If the team were to do that, they would have to say, aha, we have to be better in security. How do we do that? They would then be doing design, and maybe they are just programmers and they're not ready to do design. You know, we have to hand it to a real security designer, and we have to take the security design and feed it to a programming team, for example, a coding team. So, okay, so let's say that's long story short. Is now what I didn't do is define requirements engineer and requirements engineering. Now, long story short, everything I am speaking about in this lecture is requirements engineering. In other words, if you're doing this stuff, you are a requirements engineer. Okay. Now, typically, a requirements engineer doesn't use nice sounding words like better security. A requirements engineer will always try to quantify the security and deal with it from a quantified requirement. Okay, so in very simple terms, engineers are always quantifying, and non-engineers are using what I call poetry. We need very much better security. That's poetry. Okay, now that's a okay way of making a small trivial system. But if you're doing the health system for your country or something like that, okay, that's a very large, complex system, and it needs engineering. Large, complex systems need engineering in general. They always have, right? Building one stone needs a craftsman. Building a pyramid needs engineering. Okay? So the larger and more complex your system is, the more likely you need some ideas from engineering in order to succeed. Okay. Now we have one more minute. Again, if I give unsatisfactory answers, mainly because I have limited time, feel free to re-ask the question. Tom, you answered this, but I didn't quite understand it and I have further questions. Send me an email. I promise to answer the questions by email. Okay?
Yeah, thank you.
Okay. So, yes, Ruslan, one question before we go back to the formal lecture.
Yeah, I wanted to ask one first question. You mentioned that all the requirements should be quantifiable. Does it mean that each requirement should have numbers?
Okay. Now, if you go back to the slides, you'll see that I did not say what you said I said. I said all value requirements must be quantified. But I specifically said there are other classes of requirements like functional requirements, which are binary, and we don't quantify them unless you consider 1 and 0 a quantification, because they are just present or absent. So there are some requirements, which I call binary, which we do not quantify. We just say them with words. But the requirements I'm talking about now, value, quality requirements, they always need to be quantified. Yes, and they always need to have a scale of measure. And they always need to have numbers about what level of performance is required. But I'll be talking more about this as the lecture proceeds. But that's my answer. Let's make a, some requirements need quantification, value, quality, cost, and resource. They all need quantification, but some do not. Okay, for the moment, Ruslan? I'm gonna go
And-
back and continue the lecture.
Yeah, do not, for example, just present of some, I don't know, some field, some button. This shouldn't be quantified.
Yeah, well, there are some you cannot. If I say I want a car, the thing is either a car or it's not a car. There's no quantification. There's no 50% car or something like that, you know. So some things are just binary. They are or are not, and I call them binary requirements. But when I say quantification, I mean along a scale of measure, theoretically from minus infinity with 0 in the middle to plus infinity. Okay, anyway, I better get back to holding the lecture, and maybe the lecture will clarify something, Ruslan, and if not, you know how to email me, right? And ask the question. But I'll go back to the lecture now. Let's see. Okay. Now, this is a slide from the book Competitive Engineering. There is a special chapter there called Scales of Measure, which you can download here if you just want that chapter. And this is a map of fairly common or standard values, okay? So here's one value to have good quality. Here's another value to save resources. Here is a value to process a high volume of work, okay? Now, this quality idea, many people just say quality, and actually what they mean is bug-free if they're an IT person, and they don't say that. But qualities, of course, for IT systems are far more than bug-freeness. The nearest thing there is the reliability, the mean time between failure. Let's call it mean time between hitting a bug, is the engineering idea there. And here is a systematic breakdown, and we can learn many things from the breakdown. Number one, if you are interested in any of these and you go to this chapter, you will find ready-made scale of measure. Oh, here was the chapter, actually. I accidentally got it, but I don't want it. Let's see, I need to get back to. Okay. Yeah. Hello, let's see. Can anybody hear me? Talking.
Yes, yes.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
we can hear you.
Okay. I think I accidentally, I thought I was just gone offline. There we go. Keynote. Okay. Sorry about that. Okay. If you want to know how to, for example, define usability or user friendliness, there are two pieces of information you get here. Number one, it is usability can be decomposed into many types of usability. Here are 5 of them, and each one of them has a different scale of measure. Okay, so and the same here. If you look at adaptability, it can be decomposed into several other things at several levels, and the detailed scale of measure for each one of them, it's in this chapter 5 in the book. You can already look at it if you like, and it's ready-made. So these are almost standards for how to develop scales of measure, but you might like to take the scale of measure from the book and modify it for your particular project. Okay, they're not locked in stone. But if your problem is I don't know how to measure usability at all, then look it up in the book, is my piece of advice. Okay. Okay. Now, some values, like security, might be difficult to measure in practice. I mean, how are you going to do it? Are you going to subject your system to all kinds of security attacks that it's very difficult to do? In fact, some of those attacks you cannot imagine, only the hacker has imagined them. And you can't really measure how things stand up. You're often going to learn the hard way that your system was hacked and failed. So, but just because it is difficult to measure perfectly, that doesn't mean we shouldn't quantify the value. And the moment you quantify a value, that is, the moment you define a scale, you will discover that it is easier to think about how am I going to measure it, what we call the meter. Okay, much easier to think about it because you're very focused on a test tool, a measuring tool for that scale of measure. Okay, I find so many people who think of how difficult it is to measure some of these qualities, and they totally give up and say we cannot quantify it because it's difficult to measure perfectly. Now that's silly. You can quantify it no matter how difficult it is to measure. That's the first thing. So that shows you don't understand the difference between quantification with a scale and measurement with a meter. In practice, we have to choose measurement tools or meters that we can afford to do. If we're doing weekly sprints, not to mention DevOps, continuous delivery, but if we're doing weekly sprints, we have to be able to measure that week what happened. Okay, so one of my clients who does weekly sprints decided they would never use more than 30 minutes per week to measure. Now, by using less time to measure, your accuracy and quality of your measurement will be less, but it may be sufficient for purpose. Sometimes order of magnitude, as engineers like to talk about, is good enough. Perfect measurement is not necessary, just sufficient measurement to say we're moving forward towards the goal. That's the essential idea. Now, part 3, and slightly trickier subject. Let's say we're going to give some advanced ideas in how to write a scale, and we're going to introduce the term a scale parameter. Okay, so new idea. Okay, so here is a simple ambition level: make Warsaw safe again by reducing and mitigating any attacks or threats to citizens and visitors. Okay, well, how do you measure that? You know, well, we don't have a scale and we can't put a number on that. That's the ambition level. So here is a scale developed by my students in Warsaw who were doing a workshop. The percentage of known attack types having potential or real effects on specific stakeholders. Okay, so it's a percentage of something. We can put a number. And now, what are these things here? Well, they're what we call the scale parameter. It's almost readable. Almost anybody can read this and sort of understand it. But now attack type is a high-level parameter. It's a general idea. What are the specific ideas? Well, here they are. Here's an attack type, fake news. Here's another attack type, random lock of files. Here's another attack type, denial of service. Okay, so I call these conditions. Okay, and same here. Here's some of the effects. You know, corporate system is down, etc. And here are different stakeholders, attackers, clients of attackers, etc. Okay, now what can we do with this? We're actually modeling a complex system. So there's an idea there. This can be used to model complex systems. Okay, write down idea modeling. Okay, and what we're doing is we're modeling the performance and quality levels of a system. And many modeling methods like UML do not do that, cannot do that, and that's bad. you should be always able to model the critical qualities, values of any system. Now, I'm going to, yeah, so here is the, here's another example from the Elon Musk Tesla car thing, where the scale, we're doing the same thing, but we're putting in these different general ideas where we know that we have more specific ideas on some kind of a list, okay? So what we're going to always do is define these ideas as a set of conditions that are interesting. Now, we're also going to define critical or especially interesting conditions. So there could be, let's say there are 1,000 different types of attacks, but I only have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 here. That means those are the only 6 attacks that I am interested in handling. They are my high priority attacks, okay? What we're going to do is use this to decompose our system into deliverable steps. Now, this is agile again, okay? Agile needs to work in incremental steps, and this is a new idea. This is a tool for systematic decomposition so that we can do agile in the sense of doing one step at a time and delivering it and seeing how it works, and then incrementing our way towards objectives. Okay, there's more about this coming up. It's an advanced idea, but I'm giving it to you straight away, okay? Now, here's how we use it. If we have vehicle safety and we have a scale of measure using these parameters, okay, then here is my requirement statement, my wish, okay? I wish to get 5, the scale is how many stars you get, 1 to 5 in these rating systems. I wish to get 5 stars by next year, but not for everything, for all types of people, but only for the Tesla rear-wheel drive 4-door 2019 model, Tesla 3, only for safety equipment, front airbag, belt tensioner, etc. So this is a set of conditions, new idea, not just one. This is a set. This is, well, a set of all, okay? And for the alternative model validity, that, for publication date, that, and for the rating agency, all of them. Now, what have I done here? I have chosen a slice of everything. Let's say everything is 100 combinations, okay? And I've chosen slice 1 or sprint 1 or something like that, okay? So what I do when I choose these first time, I say, what is the most critical person type? And I write it in there. What is the most critical car specs? What is the most critical safety equipment? What is the most critical this and that and that? And I get a set of the most critical things to do. That means, what it means is, new idea coming up, when you do a sprint and you do this sprint, you will be doing the most important thing of all. And because it is a small slice, like 1%, it only costs you 1% of the cost, but maybe you're getting 80% of the value. Okay? So this is an agile tactic for ensuring that you get high value at low cost by doing early steps as high value steps. Let that sink in. Okay. So I would expect that first time you look at this, you say, oh dear, that was a lot to think about. It may seem complicated, but actually what we're doing is we are simplifying a very complex problem. See, the complex problem is all the combinations of these will need to be dealt with sometime. And let's just say that's 1,000 combination, this times this times this is and all subsets of them is 1,000 combinations. That's really complex. By doing this, we can focus on one single set, which is critical. And we do that, for example, next week. And that's much simpler. We can ignore 99% of the complexity for the moment, okay? And we can focus on that which is really important to get done. So I maintain that this is a way of simplifying very complex problems. By the way, I'm writing a new book. I'm not finished with it, but I do share it with people, called Simple. And if you're extremely interested in simplification, ask for a free link to the Simple book and I'll send it to you. But so I'm, in other words, I'm very interested in simplifying how to handle complex systems. And this is a very specific method for doing it. Okay. Yeah. Enough of that. Now, in the Valplan app, we've actually taken the contents of chapter 5, which I showed you, of the competitive engineering book, and we have ready-made scales of measure for these things, like maintainability, okay? And we put it in a library, a digital library. So, I mean, you can go to my book and you can pull it out of that library, but if you have an app, you can plug these things into the app. You can make your own app if you like. Put these things, for example, in a spreadsheet and pull them out from there would be a simple possibility. And but I click on this basically, and I automatically get the scale of measure. So that's one way of getting a scale of measure, is go to a library, whether it be my book or this tool or your own storage of these ideas on, for example, spreadsheets. You can pull a scale in, and then you can modify the scale for current purposes. By the way, these scale parameters are a tool you can use to modify how this scale is used. You just choose different conditions under system, you know, for the system you have and the failure types you are interested in, etc. Okay. So the idea here is that scales of measure can be put on a library, and the library can be built into an app or a spreadsheet. It could be digital, things like that. When we put this into in this format, this language format, into the app, it says, okay, you have a thing called system, which is a scale parameter, failure type. So what it does, it writes system defined as, and it's blank. Then you have to define what types of systems you're interested in, what types of failure type you're interested in. Again, these conditions can also be put in a library and stored for future use, which is what we actually do there. But what is in the library can be modified for current purposes. But the library gets you started with a fairly good, maybe frequently used, well-known scale of measure, is the idea. Now, I've mentioned this idea briefly, the idea that at the controlling any system or project you are working on, there's some top level of these value ideas, okay? And there's never just one. The one may be very dominant. When you ask people, is there anything else we should do with all your money and time? They will give you, invariably, they will give you a list of several other things they need to get improved. And so and the list may grow to 20, 30, 50, 100 such value requirements. But what you need to do is to prioritize the most important ones. And one way of doing it is say, okay, I have 50 to 100 values, but I'm going to choose the top 10. Okay. So I often call this the top 10. Now, you do this by discussion, negotiation, and approval. I mean, your management team has to agree that, yes, these are the top 10, and these have a priority which is greater than the others. And we'd be very happy if you did these in the coming months or year. When you've done these, you can start working on the other ones, okay? I often say the top 10 critical values. By the way, 10 is just an arbitrary but useful number. If you want 5 or 15, I don't care. But when you get up to 30 or 50, it's like there's too much to deal with. And you really need to get the critical few being worked on so that you get something done in the short term, which is impressive to the people paying you to do the project. Okay, so these values are also stakeholder values. It can be traced back to one or more stakeholders. Okay, we're actually doing a project in London here about the polluted air in London. So maybe maybe you live in a town which has pollution and has to work on it. Lots of people do. Now, here is the tag, air quality, and here is the icon or symbol for a value. This is actually the scale of measure, okay? So here's air quality. So there's the same tag, but here is the detail, okay? So here is a full statement of requirement, actually done by my students in a workshop in London. They decided that the air quality was what they wanted to plan. Okay, and let me read you through this. This is, first, this is defined as a critical stakeholder value. It is part of a set of things called top values. If I click on that top values thing, I will end up, sorry, with this, the overview. I can navigate around the app or tool with things. This is actually from the data we've collected for the whole specification. This is a visual specification. So this is the scale of measure, and these are different things on the scale of measure. And since we have clicked on the goal 950, this is the detail of that particular goal. Okay. So again, we're navigating around, but let me run you through it. So because now we're looking at a typical one page. By the way, all these parameters, they are what we call one-liners. That is, they're all one line, but all of them can be expanded into a window with more detail, as we shall see. But the one-liner format's good enough for most purposes. So the ambition level we've talked about before. So there it is, blah, 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 nice stuff. The mayor of London, still the mayor, city. And okay, then we have the scale of measure derived from this. Okay, you can read that. Then we have the meter. This is a decision for how we're going to test or measure where we are on the scale after a sprint. So again, this is related to Agile. If you're doing Agile, you have to get measurement and feedback after every sprint. And therefore, your measurement device must be good enough to do that. You have to, if you have a weekly cycle, you have to get some form of measurement within a week. And that has to tell you whether you're moving ahead or what you're doing is failing. Okay, you can have many different meters, like you could have a sprint meter, and then you could have end of project meter as a different one, which would take more time but gather better data. But this is basically a high-level statement of the planning of your test processes. Status, two different ones, but for different things. One is for all people and the other is just for senior people. And so two different values, but this is systems analysis where we are. It's not the requirement, but it's in the requirement specification. And then here are two different tolerable levels. Tolerable means the minimum you have to have, otherwise you are intolerable, and that means you are failing in some way. Like it means you're not done, it means you can't get paid and things like that. But again, for different types of pollution and different time frames and different people. Okay, so we're using these parameters to define a model. We're really modeling what was and what is the minimum we want in the future. And then the goal is what we have committed to do in the project. Okay, the goal is defined as we promise to deliver that level for these people, this type of pollution in this area. Well, that's everything by 2028. Okay, oops. Okay, and here's another goal for Greater London, not just all parts of United Kingdom, just for the NO2 pollution, just for senior people in 2029. Stretch. Stretch is a stakeholder value. You know, we're going to zero here, zero pollution. Sounds like a stretch to me, maybe by 2030. But Stretch says there is some stakeholder which would have value for this, but we are not promising in our project to deliver it yet. But when we have delivered the main goals, we should take a look and see whether we now have learned enough that we can begin moving towards the stretch goal. Okay, so the stretch goal is a way of motivating people to go further than the initial targets. Stakeholders, Mayor of London, and assumptions. Yeah, okay. So assumption is a parameter where we're stating explicitly and integrating it into the requirement any assumptions we might have made, like that the present mayor will still be the mayor at that time, or something like that, or whatever your assumptions are. But it's very useful to have in writing the assumptions rather than just everybody knows and everybody understands, which is a very dangerous kind of assumption. Now, same requirement, but we're actually looking at the scale of measure, and we had these parameters here: persons, time, pollution, area. And here we're opening the window for the scale, opening the window on the app, and we can do this manually without the app, of course, but it's a little heavier work. Now the area, turns out area is predefined, and we can get this from our library automatically, but persons are not, so we have to write down the set of persons that are interesting. This same as set of pollution, set of time. By the way, if we push this little arrow here, it says, why don't you save that pollution set there? So next time I write the word pollution, I'll automatically capture the type of pollution. And then you can keep on extending that, all the pollutions you know about, as time goes on, and learning what are the pollutions I must consider. Anyway, the main point here is to show you the idea of a window for a one-liner. So here's the one-liner for the scale, and usually clicking on that in the app, we get the window. So the idea there is that we can simplify presentation by having a one-liner, but we can build up detail that we need by having a window for these. It's two different presentation modes, and you really need an app to do that well. Otherwise, you end up with too much detail for everybody or too little planning for other people. So, new idea, benchmarks. Talked about it a little bit. I showed you the benchmark known as status. Now, the purpose of a benchmark is to give us some background information. Background means that when planning, I use this information to decide how to plan. For example, if your status is 100 and your goal is 50, and 50 is worse than 100, then that sounds like a silly idea to plan to make a system only half as good as the one you had. To plan to make it 100, well, okay, at least it's as good as you had, but why bother? Okay, and then, but to plan, if the goal is 150, which is 50 more than the status, then you're definitely improving the system by a significant amount. So the benchmarks are to see that your plan is reasonable, given how things are or were or might be. Okay, that's the idea. We have different types of benchmarks. I think we have some hopefully coming up. Yeah. Okay, so but the basic idea of the benchmark is they are systems analysis, and we reuse the scale of measures so that they are comparable to all the other plans for the future, and intelligible and numeric. We want to force ourselves to be numeric and clear, not just we have a bad system, but exactly how bad it is interesting. Okay. Now, here's the first type of benchmark, past. It just says that in the past, at some given date, 2016, for this, now again, we're defining the past better by saying it's in Greater London and nitrogen dioxide is the pollutant, and it's 135 micrograms per cubic meter. I hope I'm reading that right. Okay. So what we're doing is, yeah, so that's just, it was. Now, the wish is 67 by 2021. So we can see that for exactly the Greater London and nitrogen dioxide, moving from 2016 to 2021, we're going to reduce the pollution from 135 to 167. That's a rather clear statement. Okay, so we use past when we have collected data on a given date, which is not right now, not immediate, not real time. If you like, it's historic. And this helps people understand, why are you planning for 67? And the answer is because it's a heck of a lot better than 135, which is what you seem to have. Okay, idea past. Now, the status level. Well, here's a status level in the example. Here it is. Status is very similar to the past. It's just that it is a moving indicator. It is real time. In some ideal system, you might be, for example, it could be the data you collect at every agile sprint, the updating of that data, okay? The status. So you could rename it the sprint status or something like that. So it's very much more up to date, whereas the past could be 1 year ago or 10 years ago, things like that. So long story short, that's the status level idea. Now, we have another benchmark called the record level. Think Guinness Book of Records, but engineers have a term called state of the art. Okay, In other words, the best that's ever been done by anybody in our corporation or of the type of business we are or in our technology. Now, by stating a record, notice the status is 100, the record is 3, and the wishes are 10 and 8. I won't, and it looks like all these are comparable, except this last one here, longer term. But now, if somebody says to me, we have 100, and it says, hey, you have a short-term wish to go to 10. That's 10 times better. See, that's impossible. You say, no, it isn't. Somebody got to 3. Therefore, we know it's possible. And by examining how they did it and what cost they did it, we will understand that we can get to 10. It may be very expensive, but you can't say it cannot be done since it has been done and we know exactly how it's been done. Okay, so you use that to, idea number 1, you use it to find out which design or architecture or strategy will get you there. The one that got you to the record will probably work, but it might be too expensive. You might need another design which is cheaper. That's another thing. But the other use of it is nobody can say you cannot get to your wish level of 10 because it has been done in comparable areas, it turns out. Okay. Okay, so so that's the idea of the record. By the way, I have another statement. An expert is somebody who knows the records. If you think of an expert in any discipline like sports, ice skating or something like that. In Norway, we do a lot of ice skating, and experts in ice skating, they know the world record and the European record and the Norwegian record and the junior record for the 10,000 meter, etc. And if they didn't know these things, they wouldn't be experts. They know them in their head. They don't look them up on the internet. Okay, those are real experts. In general, real experts have taken the trouble to learn the state of the art in their discipline and to know the numbers. It's a good sign. So if you ask for a record, what is the record? And nobody can come up with it, you say, maybe we ought to get to know a record as an expert on pollution who can tell us what the record is, and then we can do more realistic planning with regard to the record. Okay, so if the record is 3 and the goal was 1, well, that's 3 times better than the known record. Good luck to you. But it may be impossible, or at least impossible with known technology. You have to be very inventive and creative like Elon Musk and do things like landing your rockets in parallel or something like that to get a cost level of the rockets that NASA cannot compete with. And then you get their business. Okay, let's see. Okay, so that's the idea of the record level. Okay, and the idea is that these things like status, past, record, these are tools, and you pick them and use them when you feel it is useful and justified. And finally, the next and I think last benchmark idea is the trend level. And the previous 3, record, past, and status, are in a sense looking out the rear view mirror, what has transpired. Trend is typically looking out the front windshield of the car, what's coming, what will be. And a trend is basically what will happen if we don't do anything. And that what's going to happen may be very, very bad. And so we have to plan to beat the trend. Okay. But we know if the trend may be unacceptable or uncompetitive or something like that. This is the way marketing people have to think. You know, what's going to happen with my competitors, and what is the trend, and how am I going to deal with it in the future? We're building our systems for the future, not the past. Okay, So we have to think about the future, not just the past. So this is a very good discipline of thinking, asking the question, how will things be in 2 years? Or how will things be 1 year after delivery of the system? How will things be with our competitors? We can look at our own system and our competitor systems and both, okay? So this is why we call the book Competitive Engineering. This is one way of looking at the competition, is to look at trends, okay? New idea. Okay, now time to start on constraints. Okay, so part 5, or probably chapter 5 of the book, we're going to look at constraints. I've already introduced constraints to a degree. So on some scale of measure, we have a tolerable limit, and it means that below that is intolerable, meaning really bad, we can't tolerate it, we don't want it, don't release it, don't pay for it. Okay. And then, but above it, we have a range which we call tolerable, meaning I can live with it. It may not be perfect, it may not be all I want, but we can operate the system safely while we are working on iteratively and with agile moving our way towards the goal. Now, the goal is a what we call a target level. So there's a set of these. We'll be discussing them in a moment. But right now, we're discussing these things, which the constraints, scalar constraints, which put a dividing line between bad stuff and not quite as bad. Okay. So and so tolerable is the simplest and most frequently used thing, but we have a few more ideas. I'm not sure I'm going to tell you more about them. We have things like okay, fail, catastrophe, death. You'll find these mainly in the competitive engineering book. For most purposes, we found that just doing the tolerable limit expresses the ideas well enough, so it probably won't go further. So intolerable, well, we can operate the system, but it's painful. If we have a death limit here, it means we cannot operate the system. It is totally out of action. So that we have different kinds of constraints. Constraint means don't be as bad as this. You are constrained. You're constrained. You have to make your system at least as good as this and better is what it means. Now, one of the reasons for having these things here is to enable us to prioritize. So I talked earlier about one prioritization technique. Your top 10 is your priority, and the next 30, 40 things is a second priority. Here's another way of prioritizing, and this is the thesis that Gerald is doing on priority. So your first priority, if you've declared and defined and agreed on a tolerable limit, your first priority is to avoid being intolerable. Your first priority is to get to this level and beyond, okay? Now, your second priority is to go beyond tolerable and get to the goal, okay? And your third priority, if you've reached a goal, is to maybe get better or maybe not. Maybe nobody has any value from going beyond the goal. Maybe some stakeholders do, okay? But so one way of looking at this idea of a benchmark is it's a way of defining your priorities. It's a way of the product owner giving information to the sprint team, the Scrum team about what to do. Okay, it's another way of thinking about it, because the product owner is the one who's supposed to prioritize. Okay, let's see. Idea, new idea. Benchmarks are used to define priority so that product owners can instruct teams. Got it? Agile. Let's see, we're doing pretty good. Okay, now by having multiple points on the scale, we can draw a time curve of, in simple terms, we start off with our status. We have one tolerable level, this one here, and we need to get to that first. And then there's another one we need to get to after it. Actually, it would be reading the numbers here, it would be reversed, but that's okay. Don't mind that. But then once we're in the tolerable area, we need to move towards a target level, a wish level. And once we reach that, we might start going towards the record, at least the state of the art. That means we know there is known technology to get there, however expensive it might be. We might stop somewhere here along the way to the record because it's getting more expensive than any stakeholder's willing to pay. But the point of all this is that a series of specifications on the scale effectively draw a, if you like, a timeline of what the team has to work on, value-driven timeline. Just this morning before we started our session, I listened to a Norwegian session and got case studies from the Social Security Administration and the Police Administration. And I noticed something, that in earlier days, they were all talking about user stories and agile and stuff like that. It turns out they've all pushed that stuff in the background, and they've decided to go very seriously for this value driven planning. In other words, they look at the organization and what the organization wants, and then they hope the IT systems will give it to them, but they're totally focused on the stakeholder values in an organization, as I am here. They've actually, what I heard today is they have two of the largest organizations in Norway in their IT sector have changed their focus from being process-oriented towards what they call product-oriented and value-oriented. Product-oriented means they don't have projects anymore. They just keep improving their systems. And value-oriented means that they're always asking, are the values getting better for how well the police serve society, how well the Social Security serves society, etc. And I've been campaigning for decades in Norway and elsewhere for this value-oriented things, and I'm very happy to say it. There seems to be a breakthrough year in Norway, and I expect that to happen in other companies. So we've reached a break point. I'll just for fun. And that part 6. So we'll take a 10-minute break. We will have discussions, and we'll start again on the hour. Let's see.
Thank you, Tom. This is excellent timing. Exactly here is 2:50.
Yeah.
10 minutes. Thank you.
So I can, finally I see Mohammed first time with, okay, they look like a nice Norwegian cap for cold weather. And let's see, Elwaki, I'm guessing Mohammed's from Egypt, but that's just for fun. guessing.
Yeah, Mohammed is was our previous colleague. Now he's working in the US, but it's true. He's from Egypt. I don't know if he can hear.
Okay. No, I just have fun guessing names, just looking at people and names. Okay, good. I scored 1 point guessing correctly, Egypt. So if anybody else would like to ask a question right now, that's fine, but we're waiting. Just turn on your microphone and ask a question.
Probably there are no questions at the moment.
Nope.
Let's see if maybe Mohammed later on will be reachable, and then maybe we can also introduce it.
Okay.
We've been in touch for all these years, but he was working here 7 years ago, actually. Of
Okay.
course, I shared the invitation to several colleagues and also former colleagues, and some people once in a while appear.
Yes, good. We can reach out to former colleagues and students and things like that.
Maybe I can ask something if
Please.
you'd like to.
Go ahead.
So, my question might sound childlike, but I just want to know from your experience of working in requirements engineering sector all these years, what do you think people who are elicitation, doing the process of elicitation and writing requirements and doing measurements on scales, ideally, how many people do you see in these kind of teams? Is it like a team of 3, 2, or have you seen just one person working on requirements engineering project, maybe a small project? What is the size of the team?
Okay, well, as you can well imagine, depends on the size of the project.
Yes.
So if you have 1,000 person project, let me give you a very rough, I'll put it another way. A very rough idea is 10%.
10%, great.
Of total staffing, very rough idea. So 99% would be silly, right? And 1% would be too little.
Yes.
So I would think it in terms of percentage. So the question becomes, what is the degree of effort needed to write requirements well enough that your project will succeed? And I would say 1% you will fail. 99% you will waste a lot of time with bureaucracy and probably overdo it. At the level of 10%, so 1 out of 10 people is requirements, okay? Then you're staffing it at the right level, okay?
That's good. Thank you very much.
I think that's the best I can give you. Yeah, I don't think in those terms. I'm more concerned if you only had one person, but you have a very critical project. The critical idea is not how many people you have, but how well you formulate the requirements. What quality level are they at? I am describing a good quality level for success, right? By the way, I've written a book I will give free on request called Success. And by the way, the last slide, you will see many of the URLs for free downloads of books, including that one. But so the question is, how much requirements work is necessary for success? And what type, for example, if you have better security as your only requirement for security, then I guarantee failure in security. Okay, it's just not good enough. If you are quantifying it, that helps you get success. You might quantify it badly. You might put on the wrong numbers. Okay, and so you will still fail. But you're guaranteed failure when you don't quantify and don't clarify. And you have a chance at success if you do these ideas I'm talking about very well, very disciplined, with high quality. Okay, so the trick is, the important question is not actually how many people. It is what is the quality level required in requirements to succeed. Now I'm going to give you there is a reference, you probably find it at the back, but if not, you email me. There's a fellow at Intel, his name is Terzakis, okay? And Terzakis deals with requirements at Intel, and he measures, using my methods, the quality of the requirements, and they require that the standards for requirements, which are like unambiguous and clear, the standards, the failure to meet the standard is only 1 in 3,000 words. Like only 1 in 3,000 words could be misunderstood. That's an extremely high level of quality of requirements. But it turns out that is the level that it pays off for Intel. Because if they do a requirement wrong and it gets into chips sent to 1 million cars all around the world, the recall costs for the bad chip will put Intel out of business. Okay? So it depends on the quality levels you need for your project. Not everybody is Intel or SpaceX or something like that. But some are. Okay, and you may one day be working for them. If we back up a little bit, go to a bank, banks are quite happy with 1 defect or fault in requirement per 200 words, okay, which is different from 1 in 3,000 at Intel. So we have a concept which I talk about in my books called the defect level per volume, per 1,000 words, and you need to, your standards, by the way, there are many standards, they're called rules in the competitive engineering book. And one rule is requirements should be unambiguous and clear, okay? And if you violate that, you're on a failure path, okay? So we measure, and Intel measures, using my methods, that's a very good case study, by the way. You want a really good case study. The Terzakis case studies at Intel are great. And they use language to write their requirements. There are over 20,000 engineers at Intel who have been trained for 2 days in what I'm teaching you now to write specifications with scale and goal and things like that. And they have been doing this for over 20 years. And but they also measure the degree to which they've done it correctly, so that before the requirements go to the architect to architect the chip, they have extremely high quality. Less than 1 in 3,000 words could be misunderstood, and it's hard work, but they do it.
Thank you very much. You answered very, very well.
Thank you. If you have the slides and go to the last slides where the references are, you can see if the Terzakis thing is listed there. If not, you email me. It's also listed. Sure. It's also listed in many of the books, like the success book I've mentioned, for sure.
Sure, I will check. Thank you.
Yeah. Other questions are welcome. We have 0 minutes, but we can take one quick question. Okay, I will continue. There we go. Get rid of that stuff. And I'll take a little drink for my coffee. Oh, okay. That's the time. On the hour, we're starting. Oh, good. Okay, part 6. So we have a third category of points on the scale called, something is clicking. Somebody is clicking. Then you turn off their mic. Okay. Still clicking. Whoever is clicking, turn off your mic. Probably keying on their keyboard. Thank you. Okay, we have a concept called targets. Now, we're going to look at 3 targets. We've looked at them all a little bit. The wish is the stakeholder desire, which we maybe can deliver, but maybe we cannot. Maybe it's too costly, takes too much time, takes too much technology that we don't have. Goal is when we decide we can grant the stakeholder their wish. So goal means our architect has found the technology and found the cost, and the technology is there and the cost is acceptable. So it is a formal goal of our system. We are going to give you this level at some given time, okay? And stretch is something much, much better than our goals, but some stakeholders might wish it. But we will only go for stretch goals when we have reached all of our goals, okay? So the first priority is to reach the goal, and the second or last priority is to examine possible extremely good things, stretch goals, okay? Okay, so let's see, here's another example of, no, it's the example we showed before. So it's important that these targets have very clear goals. That's why we have this structure, so we can pick goals for different sets of all of these. And most people do not have this structure, therefore they cannot give clear targets. Okay. And in very simple terms, the wish is not a requirement for the project to deliver, but it is a desire from a stakeholder. But a particular project or product process, as becoming more modern, may not be able to deliver this within its budget or time frame, okay? So wish is just systems analysis, really. Wish is just recording what the stakeholder has expressed they would like to have, hopefully alongside some information about why they wish to have the level, like how much money is it worth? How much sales of product or services is it worth? And then using that information, the designer or architect or strategic planner will find ways to get to the wish. And if they can, we will convert it to a goal. That is, we will say, this is no longer merely a stakeholder wish. This is the project's goal. We are sure we can deliver it. Okay. So here is a window for a wish, and we wish a level of 42. Here's the deadline for that wish. Notice we don't have, here's another concept. We don't have deadlines just for projects. There may be a deadline for a project, but we don't even have a deadline just for one requirement, like security requirement. We have deadlines for wishes and goals and for tolerable, for all the levels we have to try to get to in the future. We have individual deadline possibilities. Okay, what's this about? It's about Agile. It's about chopping your project into a series of steps that are delivered in time. But this says, look, if you have 100 steps for 100 weeks in 2 years in Agile, and this date is 3 weeks away, then you'd better plan this wish as step 3. Got it? And then we go here and we select the conditions for this wish, which attack, there are 2 types, which targets, which attackers, which attack results. And this further defines exactly which area we're wishing for. What we do in practice when we start deciding what we want, I mean, I ask people, of all the security results, which one is the most critical? And somebody says, the detection of an attempted attack. I say, okay, now what are the most critical attackers to deal with? The evil people. Okay, we put that in there. What attack results are most critical? All of them. Okay. So what we're doing is we're prioritizing again. We are choosing the conditions for the scale parameters, which are the most critical. And then we put an early date or an early sequence on them so that we get the most critical stuff done early. That makes your people who are paying your salary happy because they get the most important stuff done first. Which is very smart. I call it agile as it should be. But the agile most people learn is not doing any such thing and is not prioritizing really smart things very well. And in the ideal world and in a small system, a product owner can do that. In a large complex system, product owner as currently trained cannot. They don't have the information to do it. Part of that information would be this definition here. Let's see. Okay. So here's an example where we have a wish, but we have not handed this wish. We really have to hand a wish to, in a larger system, what we call the systems architect. Okay. And the systems architect does the high-level design work. In some systems, we would not call it architect, we'd call it a designer, or we would call it a strategic planner. But all these three types of people, they find the how, the means, how are we going to get to this level? Now, if they find a way of getting to the level, which is is valid for this set of parameters and can be done in the time frame stated here, which looks like this date here. Then and at a price that fits the budget, then they can change this wish to goal. They literally change this parameter name from wish to goal. And that goal says, our architect has validated that this is realistic, this can be done, and the project will commit to it. So then the product owner will at some point, maybe if this is 3 weeks away, within 3 weeks say, hey guys, you have to work on this. This is our new value. And I don't care what you code, but I want to see that value at the end. See, we are measuring whether we're moving towards the values, not are we coding the functionality. That's the old style that these large government institutions in Norway have moved away from after years of me telling them, please be value-oriented, not code-oriented. Almost everybody in the agile sector today is code-oriented rather than value-oriented. You can have many statements. Here are 3 different goal statements. They could be for different combinations here or different dates and times. Okay, so this is like a curve of getting better and better using Agile. I drew that to indicate we start there with the first goal, and then we, on the short term, and work our way up by the date. There's the date, 6th of July, 2027, that's that goal. Okay. Anyway, main point there, you can have any number of these points on the scale that is useful for you. You can start with a few to get running early, and then you can build it out as needed and keep track of it digitally. Here we added a stretch level. These were there was the wish, the goal A, B, and A, C, and B, but here is a stretch level. When a stretch level here means that when we've gotten to the goal 35, it looks like, hey, take a break. Don't worry about that next goal 50. That may be 1 year away. Why don't you take a look and see if you can get to 38, if you've got the technology and the time, okay? Again, this is a way of planning the work of the product owner, if you still choose to call them that. Okay, part 7. Let's see, I'm going to look at my time now. I've got, I will run to the hour. So I've got about 50 minutes. And there are lots of, we're about halfway through. Okay, we use a lot of time for introductions, but we don't have to get through everything. Okay, okay, part 7, meters. I've talked about meters a little bit, but meter is one or more ways of measuring along this scale. So meters, you could call them test processes if that's more familiar for you. But and meters can be built into the agile process every sprint. They can also be meters after accumulation of sprints, like with release to the world market of an app. Okay, and there can be meters built into your own system to measure how things are with regard to this property. So you know, they're completely, so the first meter is so you can manage your Scrum or your Agile delivery. Your second meter is so you can manage release to a market or to a contract. And the third is so you can manage the operation of the system. Okay. So there's nothing wrong with having 3 different meters planned. Usually what we do at meter is a high-level 1-sentence specification, and then somebody, let's call them test planners, has to plan in detail the test process for how that's going to be done. But at least we have some idea of how we're going to measure what's on the scale, and as opposed to no idea. A meter has all of these different quality attributes, and I don't have time to do more than point that out and give you the list. Here are some of the cost aspects of a meter. So picking ideally meter, designing a meter is finding a meter that fits all of these qualities for yourself and all of these costs for yourself. In practice, it's a lot more intuitive, like we're very happy if we get a fairly cheap meter that does the trick and we move on, okay? But in advanced requirements engineering, you would do like advanced engineers do, and you worry a lot about these characteristics of your meters. Enough said. Part 8, other kinds of background specification. Remember the things like the benchmarks, in other words, past and status and record, they were background specifications. In other words, they're not the primary, they're not the statement of the requirement itself. They're in the statement as background information for the core, really important specifications of what is this requirement. So there's a lot of general purposes of requirement specifications, and I don't have time to go through these in detail, but I have given you the list in writing. And for example, they help you prioritize. They help you deal with risks. They help inform people who weren't in the meeting. So about what's on, things like that. And so there's just a very long list of why you need to include background specifications in your requirement specification. And most people don't do it. They have the requirement. Now, by the way, even in a user story, the who it is a background specification, And the design, well, we can take our choice, but if we considered a requirement specification that we're going to do X to save time, then X is information about the design you're thinking of doing for doing it, and its background. So here are some background specifications, which are standard in language. Authority, intended readership, owner, responsible, implementation instance, etc., dependencies, and on we go. So in other words, as you can see in a page of one requirement, there could be half of all of it could be background information. Okay, here's a background information status. Scale is not background information. Tolerable is not background information. Record is background information. Okay, so but it's important to understand that we consciously bring in things that are not the requirement itself, but they're extremely useful for these purposes on the left, to put into and have as a regular thing in your requirement specifications. Okay. So I'm a big believer in motivation, and motivation begins with somebody is responsible and therefore they feel motivated. So for example, when you assign an owner to the specification, that means the owner of all this data. And it means nobody can change this without going through the owner. That's called, that's version control of the requirements, okay? Only the owner has the password that allows changes here, for example. And the owner feels very responsible because their name is on it. And so silly things won't get in here because the owner doesn't want to be made to look silly, etc. And same as we go to other types of responsibility in the project. Yeah, okay, part 9. I'm gonna look at my watch. Long story short, I've already made the point. If you have such clear, numeric, well-specified requirements, you can use them in bids, proposals, and contracting. In other words, legally binding things. The other option is to pay a lawyer a great deal of money for interpreting in a court case, where you're suing a supplier, and to find out what you meant, but you didn't bother to write down. Okay, so save the legal costs and define it well to begin with. Okay. I'm just gonna do a little sip of coffee. Good. Okay. Here's a little case study. I came across this. Here's the where's the detail? Well, the detail somewhere in these things. I came across a report sent to the Obama White House from about 8 universities like MIT, UCLA, University of Southern California, and IBM in Japan, which is when IBM was had Watson and other artificial intelligence things. Anyway, it was a report on artificial intelligence, future of AI. And they had what they called a proposed principles of AI. And here they are in full. And I noticed these principles weren't principles. They were actually statements of, if you like, requirements done very badly, done at the ambition level, done without numbers, done without measurement. And they were sending this to the White House. Now, what's poor President Obama going to do when reading this? I mean, what is he going to understand? What are his technical advisors going to interpret here? What did the universities mean with all these ambiguous words. Giving consideration. What does that mean? Ensuring the abilities. This is pure bullshit. Now you can say politicians do bullshit. That's what they do. You know, vote for me. I will save the world. Okay. So, but I looked at that and I said, we all agree that AI needs to be managed so that it does not destroy humanity, something Elon Musk is very worried about. You may have noticed. It has to be transparent so we can see how it's making decisions like, will you get this insurance? Will you be hired for the job? Will you get this loan? And you can't just say it, you know, AI systems must be transparent. You've got to define these things. So what I did was I took and I rewrote all of these with scales of measure. So in this document, gilb.com/DL962, you will find my slides where I have shown how all of these AI characteristics can be quantified and can be clear. And that means that the president and his advisors and anybody else who gets this will understand more, and the universities who are trying to cooperate on this will understand each other. They don't. I finally, 2 years ago, held a talk in front of the chief of the team from IBM Japan on AI, and I held this talk, and I basically said, these universities are full of bullshit and they don't even know what an attribute is or a principle. And when they write it down, they have no idea of how to clarify it, and they are highly embarrassing. Their university should be embarrassed having such bad people working on AI. And at the end of my lecture, the professor and chief of the IBM AI team was in London to look at standards for AI, by the way, and he came to my seminar. He stood up and said, I completely agree with what Tom Gilb is saying. In other words, yes, Ma, we do need to quantify these things. We cannot not do it. So hurrah, one intelligent professor amongst many embarrassingly silly people. Another friend of mine from Poland, Pavel, he was at my summer cabin in Norway about 2019. And I said, I want to write a new book, but I've run out of ideas. And he said, look at the United Nations Sustainability Plan. So I did, and I found the same problem, full of nice sounding things like reduce poverty and help education, but and full of designs rather than clear things. So I wrote a whole book where I showed that all the United Nations sustainability goals can be quantified with scales of measure. And again, you can get a copy of that book from me. And here it is right here. Okay. Both talks on it. And so what we're learning is that these are some of the most important things on the planet, you know, making the planet sustainable. Even the British Prime Minister is going to show up at the conference in Egypt. He decided finally. And AI, one of the most important technological things going on. And we are not managing these things with clear requirement engineering ideas. These universities haven't even figured them out. And I hope your university and your friend universities will at least know about these things and do a much better job on it than we're looking. I mean, you can easily become better than Massachusetts Institute of Technology by doing this. Okay. Let's see. Here's a chapter on presenting value specifications. Here, if this is what the user originally said, this I want the best security to fight hackers against all types. Now, this isn't good enough to quantify and do things like that. We're going to write a scale of measure with all these parameters. What we do is we capture the ambition level, and then we can point out that all those things you said here are in here. Okay, this is just a way of reflecting what you said are important, and with numbers we hope you agree with, and deadlines we hope you agree with. Okay, in other words, you can relate their bad ambition levels and user stories directly to the scales of measure and the other specifications. That's my advice. So that's one of the reasons I bring the ambition level in. It is the bad bullshit specification made by the top manager or politician. And that's okay, as long as we realize that if we're doing something really big and important, like saving the health of the world, United Nations, we need to have better definition than that. And we need some method of structuring it so it's clear and measurable. And language is at least one clear way of doing that. If you have a equally good or better way, let me know. Use it. Be happy. Okay. But we can show that, my point here is we can show the connection between the bad stuff people typically start with at United Nations and at University of Southern California, and show that what we've done is taken your ideas and your environment and turn them into a structure where we can measure and communicate the ideas much more clearly. Here's something which is a whole separate lecture in itself. And there's I wrote a book this year called Value Impact Estimation Tables. I think you will find a link to it in the last slide here. But what I do with these quantified levels is I take all the designs and strategies, the bright ideas, and I put them on a table, and then I ask people to estimate and or measure how good is this idea for that. And in this case, this modular construction idea delivers 50% of what I need to do to get from 1 to 3. Okay, and this one here, more deterrence, has a negative side effect, and it makes the crime rate worse, etc. This modular construction delivers more than I need to get to my wish for the type of tendency, etc. So now this requires a whole day of teaching, a whole book, but I thought I'd show you what we do. You see, in the user story, it says, I want a better housing type using modular construction. Okay, what we're doing here is we're putting a number on what we mean by housing type, and we're putting a number on how good we think modular construction is for that now numeric goal. Okay, so this is a way of visualizing our architecture, our plans, our strategies, and it's also a way of see, these become agile delivery steps. And now we can plan what we're thinking of getting in multiple dimensions on our agile delivery steps and feed back the real number of how much we got. Now that's a lot all at once, very short, but at least you've seen it. At least you'll find it in most of my books. For example, a chapter in the competitive engineering book. And I just wrote a whole new book on it called Value Impact Estimation Table. So I could read up on it. And maybe next year I'll hold a lecture just on this. So some notes on specifications. Long story short, there are many levels of specification, like the political top level, the directorate level, the IT level, the subsystem level. Okay, and the point is, what I've taught you can apply and be used at any levels, so that we can make sure the levels are synchronized, that is, in tune with one another. And I have a whole chapter of the vision engineering, vision planning, value planning books discuss the problem of levels and how we get to it. One guy who inspired me a lot in thinking about this is this fellow here, Ralph Keeney, a professor. I think he's professor emeritus now of several different universities, but quite an interesting guy. And what he taught was that at any level you are, there's a level above you and there's a level below you, and these are related. That's long story short, but I find that a very powerful idea. So wherever you are, you're always asking, what is the stuff above us that's driving us directly? And what is the stuff below us that, and the thing is, you can use language and these planning methods at all levels. Okay. By the way, in listening to my Norwegian friends in the police and Social Security Administration, they were doing this in their value planning right now. They're finally there. They weren't just saying, what's the use case and code it. So this becomes valid as you move to the value planning. Well, it's called value-focused thinking. No surprise there. Here's a case study from Ericsson. Let's see, I've got 20 minutes left. I choose to skip the case study, but some of you can read it. It's got stuff about the different levels. And make a long story short, Ericsson did this in the major division of Ericsson and succeeded. But it's doing all this stuff, okay? And I choose to skip it to win time here. Part 12 at about 16, not too bad. I want to get to part 15 that talks about the different other methods like user stories and use cases. But long story short, we can use these budgets, okay, which is any time, people, money, ideas, and we can here these ideas are in the impact estimation table. So we're looking at a particular design at the capital cost of the design, the calendar days it will take, and the full-time equivalent people. Okay, and we have a sort of an average number of the development resources roughly for each sprint or each strategy. And we can use that to prioritize the different strategies. But long story short, everything we've taught is relevant to the resource budgets. And that's enough of that for the moment. Decomposition, okay. Change control. I've talked about that. I pointed to the owner, and we'll let that speak for itself. Part 15. Yeah, the 14. No, that's that impact estimation table. By the way, here is the agile cycle that we call the Gilb cycle, which is an extension of the Deming plan, do, study, act cycle. But we've got things here like stakeholders and decompose and that the other cycles don't have. This is our eternal cycle of the product, which is the new modern thing, not a project which stops, but an eternal cycle of improvement. And I talk about that in all the books. Here's where I really wanted to get to. We've got, actually, I've got 25 minutes if I go to the hour. If I finish early, we've got more time for questions. But I wanted to share with you my opinion on some of the other technologies that you will see. So that's part 15 of the book. Now, here is a checklist of how I analyze any technology you learn about. Okay. For a simple example, let's say you're getting a technique called UML. Okay. And you ask the question, is there any concept of stakeholders in there? And the answer is there is not. and I say minus points to you. Any method dealing with requirements that doesn't explicitly deal with stakeholders, which only limits themselves to customers and users, which is where most of the agile people are, that is not a good enough method. Today, for larger complex projects, you must absolutely have detailed consideration of stakeholders. By the way, I finally wrote a book I've been planning to write for years called Stakeholder Engineering. If you can't find it in the back here, ask me for a copy if you're very interested in going to do a doctoral degree on stakeholders or something like that. Anyway, that's an example of a question, but here, so I've got about 16 different criteria that I use to decide whether I think a method is a good method or a bad method. Now, user stories fails that test about dealing with stakeholders. Actually, I think it should be renamed stakeholder stories. Stakeholder stories. User tells me right away that this is a narrow-minded, small-scale, immature culture. Okay? I mean, users are important, but some stakeholders, like the European Union law, is far more powerful and useful to know about than the users. It has a higher priority because they can totally stop your software product from getting on the market at all. Okay? So long story short, user stories are okay for small scale systems. In fact, they're brilliant for small scale systems. And that's what they were designed for. But the moment you're doing serious business, like a large government organization or a multinational product or something like that, and you've got 100 or more people working on your project, then user stories are for children and kindergartens. They're not good enough. They're good enough to put in the requirement and then develop the scale and do the impact estimation table for the design and things like that. Use cases, well, okay, but actually when I analyze it, I find that use cases correspond to these scale parameters, to make a long story short. Okay, so that's where they are just one little part of the holistic picture. So they actually describe use cases, but they do more than that. That is, I'm sorry, language does more than that. It does the quantification, it integrates it with the architecture and things like that. So that's my view on use cases. It's essentially this, what I've called the scale parameters. Earned value management. I have a good friend I've held called Paul Simon, who specializes in this, and he's continually fighting with the US government, which has made this obligatory. But it's sort of a joke because it's not about value. It ends up being how much money we have spent is the value, which is not true. People spend a lot of money getting zero value. So the whole thing is a joke, so don't waste your time. But if you want some more information on why it's a bad idea, there's Paul, there's a link to it. Now, functional requirements and non-functional. A lot of people, when they have their requirements, if you take a deeper look at them, they're all what we call function. They're all describing what the system does. Now, the reason is you need that information in order to program it. Okay, so, okay. Now, if we take a look at this map, here are the things I've been talking about, the performance requirements, the quality requirements, okay? You need to, in addition to knowing the function requirements to program it, you need to know the performance requirements to architect it and to program it, and to succeed and not fail. Success and failure is here. This functional requirements just makes you equal to the competitor. You're doing the same thing. You're charging interest in the bank. So what? That doesn't win anything. It makes you a player, but it doesn't make you a winner. Okay, winning, losing, success and failure is in this area. And we have too many methods that hardly look at it at all. So the giveaway is when people start talking about non-functional requirements. You've heard that. That's all this other stuff, and not least all this stuff. When they say non-functional, I know they are childish, immature, small-scale losers. Winners care about the things that determine whether you win or lose, and that is not functionality. That is quality and cost, as everybody knows. Balanced scorecard, reference back to Harvard Business School, started out saying, hey, the only thing we've quantified is all the financials, but we keep on talking about this kind of stuff, but largely we don't put numbers on it, or we allow people to not put numbers on it. So nobody's quite sure what all this stuff is. I was working for one of the biggest banks in the world that caused the 2008 depression. And I found their top management doing exactly that, using balanced scorecard with bullshit all over the place. And they were very, very frustrated. And I said, your problem is you are letting the bullshit be bullshit. And you need to clarify these critical goals for one of the world's largest banks. And you need to put numbers on it, which you can do. And they did that. And I have a case study of that if somebody wants to look at that in detail. Okay. Okay. So balanced scorecard, the thing with balanced scorecard is everybody who becomes a manager and has an MBA degree has definitely learned this, but they've not learned the good version of this with numbers using my methods. They've actually normally learned versions of it which allow bullshit to be major critical objectives. And so an awful lot of, and they learned other similar things. So managers are taught very badly in their university training. Unfortunately. Now here's another one, quality function deployment. Now this is for techies, this is for engineers. This was developed by Toyota and spread with lean methods. And basically, it is very similar in structure to my impact estimation table. Here are the customer requirements. Notice it doesn't say stakeholder. And here are the designs. And here in the middle of the table are some kinds of how good it is. But if you take a deep look here, it says reliable. It doesn't say mean time between failure is 1,000 hours, which good engineers would do. Okay. And what is this here? Well, it's a strong relationship. Who said? I don't know. How strong is strong? For reliable, which is unknown. I don't know, but somebody put it in there, and I don't know who they are, and I don't know how they did it. So this is total bullshit. We traced Mr. Ono, who spread these methods, recently admitted that when the Americans came to Japan to find out about lean methods, he carefully avoided telling them what he was really doing, fed them a lot of bullshit, and hoped they would go away doing bad methods and not be a good competitor with Toyota. And that's exactly what happened. So here is disinformation intended to destroy the enemy's ability to build good cars in Detroit. And they never recovered from that. The first thing Obama had to pay a lot of money to was General Motors and that gang in Detroit. They failed massively, using these methods, of course. TOGAF is one of the architecture methods, and it says very explicitly that they should have quantified quality requirements. And then everywhere I look, trying to find examples, they don't do it because it's not in their culture. So show me TOGAF quantifying their quality requirements, and you have maybe a good version of TOGAF. But I don't believe it's a useful method, because I believe architects must have these value requirements as primary input to the architectural process. And TOGAF says it believes in this, but it does not do it very well. Here's another architectural method. I've always been fascinated by the Zachman framework, lovely little colorful tables of all the different stuff you have to do. But I once had a dinner with Zachman in London, and I put my methods in front of him, and I'd analyzed his methods, and I said, your methods are completely lacking in quantification and engineering rigor. So my methods are better than your methods. So why don't you throw away your methods and use my methods? And he smiled at me and said, Tom, I have spent years doing legal actions and lawsuits to get the property rights to my own methods. And I finally got them. No way in my old age am I going to change my methods and then have to go through new stuff like that. People buy my methods, however bad you may seem to think they are. They buy the methods, they pay me, I'm a rich man. I have no intention of improving the methods to be better. Now, this is very typical. People who are earning a lot of money on a stupid method like user stories or Scrum or SAFe do not care to make it good enough as long as you are foolish enough to pay money to them for their bad methods. I commented on UML earlier. It's not very good at looking at values at all. Something new that popped up were design sprints. We're sort of agile, right? But I read Jake's book on it, and I discovered there were no case studies except the one to a company that had gone bankrupt. And this is just a bad form of agile or SAFe. So with yellow stickies. In other words, maybe a good idea for a very small project. I'm talking 3 men and a dog size of project. Might be a good idea. But the moment you scale up to large and complex, this is not what you want to do. The proof that it was a bad method was they very quickly went to version 2 and version 3, trying to get rid of all the bad ideas that they had initially, but they really didn't ever get there. What I do recommend is what I call my project startup week, which is values driven. There are papers on this down there. I do this even on very large projects. One case study, this is a project which is an app built by a little Norwegian company of 60 people, had an 8-year-old product, and they're spreading it to 200 countries, reasonable size. But they used this method, and then they succeeded in capturing the world market as a result. That's one nice case study, confirm it. You'll find references there. But a larger case study was US Department of Defense, who used it to fix an old personnel system for the military. And they used 1 week to replan using quantified objectives. And then the next week, they could start delivering agile and getting results. So I recommend that and have case studies to prove it works. OKR was mentioned in some of the Norwegian case studies today, but people are actually moving away from it and realizing, again, like many of the things, it's good for small scale things like planning my personal work 2 weeks ahead. It is not good for building a large government system. It's too primitive for reasons that should be obvious if you got the lecture here. I couldn't wait to get to this one, the Moscow method. I'm sure some of you heard about it. It's a well-known prioritization method. And I think it's very good for, again, for simple systems. But again, the larger and more complex system, we need something more dynamic and based on these quantified goals. And this is not based on those quantified goals. So, and this is what I'm teaching Gerald to in his thesis, to do advanced prioritization. So, but you'll find I've written about prioritization in, for example, my systems engineering architecture book. There's a whole chapter on prioritization. Also heard a recent lecture on CMM capability maturity model, which is wildly popular in China. I learned, perhaps because they can dictate at the top that everybody's going to do it. The moment it's voluntary, people think it's far too bureaucratic and they avoid it. Anyway, there's a new version 3 coming out, which is destroying some of the stupid bureaucracy about it. I have some credit in the original models developed by IBM, were exactly what I'm teaching here, the idea of quantifying the qualities. That was in the original version, but people kept on adding, governments kept on adding bureaucracy to it. So the good stuff, like what I taught, disappeared and a massive bureaucracy came. And the only people who would do it have a Chinese person with enough power to say everybody's going to do CMMI. Anyway, that's where that is right now. This is updated as of 2 days ago from Bill Curtis, who is one of the people who built CMM and CMMI at the Software Engineering Institute at Carnegie Mellon University. Okay. So standards, yep, in the competitive engineering book. Val plan, we've talked about. Stakeholders, hope you find my book there. So that's the end of the lecture. Here are some of the books I've talked about. There's the stakeholder engineering book. There's the Musk's methods book. There's the value impact estimation book. There's the simple book. So for those of you I've pointed to these, you can get them free links right away. If you get a non-free link, like at LeanPub and you're a poor student, write me an email. I will give you the free version of stakeholder engineering. There's a large free sample, about 50% at LeanPub. And if you're rich, you can pay me $5, but I'd love to give you the free copy. Okay, so that is the end of my lecture. And we have formally 7 minutes left. And I've can actually do more than that if there's a flood of questions. So I will turn it over to any questions and take a sip of coffee.
Thank you, Tom. Thank you for your exhaustive lecture. I know that actually you have more material. There is much more you can do. Maybe at some point you can also do the second part at the end of the year. Maybe, I don't know. I mean, after the exams, we will see.
After the exams. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I'm happy to come back and do things like the impact estimation table are very, very basic.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, is there any question from anyone or any comment maybe or curiosity, anything? Anyone want to add anything? Mohammed, I don't know if Mohammed is online or just logged in and I'm not sure if he's there. Or I don't know, anyone else want to add anything to the day?
This material is very hard to understand. I think 3 hours is not enough.
No, we know that. Therefore, we have a 391-page book for you.
Yeah, this is kind of material for 10 hours or something like this.
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
Question from Ruslan, right?
Yeah.
Please.
Yeah, if nobody have like question about the lecture, can I ask like one general question about IT industry?
Yeah, go ahead.
You know, like nowadays the IT area is really fast evolving. We can say like it is on hype, and like the salaries is average salaries is more than comparing to other areas. What do you think? Like this trend will be for long years, or like in 10 years, software will be like some usual things, not so progressive, and the other area will be on the top in comparing to software?
Now, your question is complex, and I need to, I think I understand roughly. I think you're asking me about the fads, the fashionable methods, which in chapter 15, I made some comments on some of them. Now, here's I'll tell you what I've tried to do since I was 20 years old. I've tried to figure out methods I could use for the rest of my life. And I have figured them out, and I have used them all of my life. There are some methods, and value engineering is one of them, which will not go out of fashion. If anything, what I learned today at the Norwegian conference was it's coming into fashion finally, and I hope it will never go out of fashion. Okay, things like Scrum and SAFe and some of those things I had in chapter 15, they work as long as people are silly enough to use them and pay for them, but their projects fail. And when people get very, very tired of failure, they throw away the methods, finally, that don't work, and they adopt new bad methods that don't work and use them for a few years, okay? We need to find there is a set of the book Success that I showed you there. This idea of quantifying your most critical things is a method that cannot go out of fashion. It has always been in fashion. I always ask myself, could these methods have been used in Egyptian times to engineer pyramids? And if the answer is yes, I then say, is it obsolete? Can I use it today? Yeah, I've been using it for many decades. Okay, is there any reason to think it will go out of fashion in 100 years? No. Okay, then we should teach it at university. Okay, everything I teach, everything I do, I have put to the test. Is it has a long half-life? It will always work. It always has worked. Mainly, I'm teaching engineering methods which have been around for thousands of years. Okay, and the new stuff like Scrum, like even Jeff Sutherland, who invented Scrum, says over 60% of all the Scrum projects are total failures. Okay, I mean, what do you want? So please do not waste your time learning and doing these fashionable things that in fact do not work. I don't ask you to just do my methods because I said they're successful. I do ask you to try them and find out if they succeed for you. If they do succeed for you, then continue to use them. Andre had his hand up.
Hello, could you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yes, hear you great.
Can we discuss, or can I rephrase like a main idea of this lecture to be more familiar with this idea? May
yes,
I
go ahead.
rephrase?
Please go ahead. Good idea.
That as I understand, there are a lot of problems with the requirements engineering and how people define goals and how they measure these goals. And your ideas is in the field, in the sphere when we need to think, focus on right description related to the topic, related to the business, and right scales and measurements that will be our success metrics.
Excellent. You get an A+ on that.
Okay, interesting, because you know, I had this experience when top managers, like they spent maybe several weeks on the description on the definitions, on scales and measurements, and I didn't have an idea in my head their main reason, like why they did it, and that's but right now I am like, I understand that it is really important to formulate. Okay, thank you.
I mentioned one thing. I mentioned my 1 week startup method. On the first day, even for extremely large projects like US Department of Defense, we identify and quantify the top 10 objectives on one single day from 9 in the morning to 5 in the afternoon. So you don't need to spend months. And then we have a better, the Brigadier General, and I have this in writing from him, said that he went to West Point and learned the best planning methods the American West Point could teach a general. And he said, your method, Tom, is the best fucking method or planning I have ever seen. I've got that in writing from a general. Okay, so these methods are superior, yet they can be done in a day for the requirements and in a week to get the agile process rolling with results coming in the next week. That is exactly what Confirm It did. I gave it a previous case study. But there's a lot to absorb here, but don't worry, erase your mind, relax, have good exams, then make a decision to continue learning these by maybe reading the books or not. And try out these ideas in small pieces, right? That's all. And then you will learn what works and what doesn't work and what is useful by practical experience. That's it.
Okay, may I ask
Andrei,
one more
yes,
question?
please.
During my previous experience, I interact with the people and came to a conclusion that requirements engineering, requirements elicitation, it is more the communicative tool, and because of this fact, we should focus on people, on psychological aspects, while we have this conversation and this activity. But what is your opinion? How is important psychology in requirements engineering?
Now, I will surprise you. At university, I did not study engineering, even though I am the son of an engineer. I studied social sciences, psychology, and sociology. So of course I would answer that these are very important subjects. This is my discipline, okay? Forget that. You are absolutely right. It is, when we talk about, please read my stakeholder engineering book, right? This is, these stakeholders, this is largely about psychology, what they feel they want, how strongly they feel, why do they feel this way? So stakeholder engineering is all about the psychology and sociology of people and organizations. And this is very important for an analysis and specification of requirements. Okay, so yes, it's on the right track. And of course, the reason this is pointed out is that so many of us are geeks and programmers, and we program because we don't like to deal with people like our wife or our girlfriend, okay? We like to deal with computers who do exactly what we say and don't bother us, okay? So we actually have a type of person in IT who is not very well versed on the psychology of computer programming, as my friend Weinberg wrote a book on, and pointed out that, hey, it's about people. It's about their wishes and needs. And so requirements are about the needs that people feel they have. So yes, yes, yes. But a good way of being more advanced would be to read the stakeholder engineering book, free copy of which is there.
Thank you for your answer.
Thank you, Andre. By the way, just to put a limit on everything. I've booked this Zoom thing until 30 minutes after the hour. That's sort of maximum, but that should be enough to squeeze in other questions. But we don't have to go this minute, even though we've run over the official time, and people can leave and say, please, and we are still recording this if you want to catch up on the questions later.
Well, I think that if there are a few more questions, probably we can take them. But if there are, but I don't know.
I'm happy with that.
Mm-hmm. Probably not. Probably there are no.
Oh, you have to give time, Manuel. People are, but now remember, there's my email. You're very welcome to ask a question by email and get answers by email. I love to answer questions in writing by email. So, but the difference is it isn't recorded and everybody doesn't get this unless you share it. But you can share.
Yes, probably also a lot of material, so need to digest it a little bit and to
absolutely. By the way, I have spent about 50 years digesting this material.
Yes, I'm sure it takes a lot of time.
I really did my first agile projects in 1960.
In 1960, so 50, not 15 years, 50 years.
50, yeah. About 50 years ago, I started developing language. I wrote 1976, my software metrics book, and it was based on practice from 1966.
Mm-hmm.
So, I've literally been doing this 50 years. So, but I understand two things. A team like at U.S. Department of Defense can learn to do it and do it on Monday in one day, and they've never had any training.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, that's pretty good. It does not require months of training and discussion. It requires one day with a coach to get this done. Okay. The other is that to fully, I have friends I talk with. I have a friend called Chris Dale. He works with large government projects in London, and I've known him for 30 years. We talk every week, and he learns a little bit every week. And he used the impact estimation table to plan Brexit for the United Kingdom. And he said, I love this impact estimation table, Tom. And I said, Chris, you have known about the impact estimation table for 20 years. He said, yes, but I'm a slow learner. So be kind to yourself. Of course, it takes time. It takes 10,000 hours to become a master of anything. Okay, start your 10,000 hours. You had the first 3 hours now.
Yes. Thank you, Tom. Thank you very much. So maybe we will organize a second part.
Okay.
We'll be in touch. Our students have the exam on the 7th of December, and then maybe there is a little bit more, free time. But we will discuss with them and with you, and we see what we can. Otherwise, you are always welcome next semester to give a guest lecture in my other course that is about formal modeling of the environment.
Ah, well, that's where we should do the impact estimation table.
Yeah.
That's a modeling technique.
Not perspective on requirements, but
yeah.
Thank you. Have a nice afternoon for you.
Yes.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. Hope you.
Thank you so much.
Hope you
Thank
have.
you. Thank you.
Hope you have fun. Fun the next 1,000 hours. I hope you have fun the next 1,000 hours. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. There we go. And I need to, let's see. I need to stop the recording. Okay, stop cloud recording.